This edition of Drift should be the final one on tape. It looks that way anyway, as we're in the process of acquiring a small printing press, which hopefully works. And our East Coast promo man, J.M. Neal, tells me he has a new computer that needs input. Well, let's wait and see what number 9 might look like. If I get film for the 8mm camera, maybe it'll turn into a movie. Who knows? First up, without further ado, is a short story by T. Angle, which I will read. He seems to be unavailable. It's called Fields of Flowers. Is it a person's environment that makes him dull-witted, or is it simply his ridiculous nature? How often I've wished to know the answer, because then it would have something to tell people when they ask, "What's the matter, you blockhead? What is it that's wrong with you?" It isn't that I purposely try to act stupid. The saints all know I don't. But each time, nonetheless, I end up asking that same question. It's become an obsession, searching for the reason behind my behavior. Take, for example, what happened last Wednesday. It was just getting dark and people were being spewed up out of the subway system going home from their jobs when it occurred to me that since these same people rode the rails so often, well, at least twice a day, 5, sometimes 6 days a week, usually 50 weeks every year. "Excuse me, sir," I said, coming up alongside a neatly dressed gentleman carrying a small brown leather attaché case. "I was wondering if, well, do you think the city's transportation system is really adequate? There are so many of you, and—" He stared at me wildly as if I had accosted him with a knife or a gun, and without so much as a nod, moved quickly away from me, melting like a piece of warmed ice back into the crowd. Not knowing how to react, I stood there an instant, then was pushed roughly aside by 3 hurrying young women whose perfumes alone might have knocked me aside. As it was, my reactions were quick, and my hand found a railing to steady myself on. I leaned on it, letting my breath out in long, silvery streams. It was certainly getting chilly. The traffic, thicker than a moment before, began moaning. A streetcar slammed to a stop. Inside it, I could see people hanging on to anything within reach. 4 or 5 people with neckties hurried out of the subway exit entrance and shoved their way to the streetcar, which was already overcrowded. Voices were all around my head, creating a multi-layered paragraph of nonsense. They sounded like birds. I was getting dizzy and hoped I wouldn't become ill. The setting was perfect for it, but I pictured myself falling to the sidewalk or tumbling perhaps head over heels down into the subway's throat. I gripped the railing tighter with both hands. "Help!" I wanted to scream, but knew that would only make things worse. The last thing to do in a crowd if one needs help is to start yelling. I've learned that over the years, if little of anything else. I pulled together after a few moments of telling myself it was nothing more than a dream, and soon I would awaken. It wasn't the truth, I knew, but I had to do something, blank out the sense of reality, the absurdity of our lives. I saw a coffee shop across the street and decided to go inside and sit down, perhaps if I could distract myself. Once safely across the street, another adventure, and seated at the counter, things seemed a bit better. My curiosity, all the questions I'd wanted to ask, faded at the sight of a long counter filled almost to the ceiling with different types of donuts. The waitress was asking me something, but I barely heard her. She went away. I was unable to speak anyway. All those donuts, all the same, yet every one so different. Picturing a large vat of dough with little men in sugared suits jumping up and down on long fat tubes of flavoring, I felt a sudden urge to leap over the counter and start throwing these donuts to customers. "Lemon, chocolate, watch out for the almond-colored peanut rolls, heads up, free sweets." But naturally I kept in a control mode, as the expression has it, and stuck my hand in the air to get the girl's attention, like a child at school. The coffee was too hot and tasted of chlorine, which made me glad the water had been boiled well. Looking at the glass coffee container, I noticed how weak its contents appeared. Good coffee, you know, should not have a consistency one can see through. I said nothing, however, and did my best to drink it, trying not to think of the donuts, though hundreds of them were only feet from my face, their aroma almost intoxicating me. Closing my eyes, I began to imagine living in a world of nothing but flowers, images of tulips and bluebells, fields of wild pinks and yellows and green, grassy hillsides. Suddenly remembering the donuts my mother made, I snapped out of it, spilling a hot brown liquid onto the counter. I apologized, though no one noticed. Everyone was preoccupied with their donuts. I requested a rag from the waitress, and she mopped up the mess I'd made. "Are you always so nervous?" the expression in her eyes asked, but she said nothing. I offered her 50 cents for her help, but she pointed to a sign, "No tipping." There were some Chinese people sitting at one of the tables. Their conversation was quite animated. I wonder if they'd noticed me, what I sounded like to them. "Nice day," I blurted out, catching the eye of one of them. She looked away. Could it be she thought I was being fresh? "No, no," I went on. I was simply saying that it is a pleasant sort of. This would never do, I thought, glancing out the window at the crowds and the vehicles all jostling for position. More speed, more speed! Out of the way, you nitwit! "Well, if you look up," I said, "there are large cumulus formations to the west." This was boring to her, obviously, embarrassing her. She turned away, speaking to one of her companions in a Cantonese dialect. He leaned toward her, then turned to me. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Maybe he thought I was attempting to be smart. "No," I replied. "It's just that, well, I wondered, and I thought that, why does everyone have to do this day after day after day? I mean, look at them." I stood up, pointed my finger beyond their heads toward the street. "It's like this every day," I said. "Don't they ever think of anything but hurrying, rushing? It's not good. See the expressions on their faces? None of them are happy, are they? Where are they off to now? Won't they be back in the morning at 8 o'clock sharp? Their brains will never be anything but instruments of whatever it is they're building. And what are they building? Something to die in, or because of? Why?" But even as I spoke, the Chinese party was rising from their table, getting set to leave. The man who had asked me if something was wrong stared at me, scowling. The lady tugged at his coat while the others tried to ignore my presence. Once again I was making a spectacle of myself, but why should it matter? Nothing seemed to matter to this bunch, to anyone. "Hey, Bud," came a voice in the corner of the room. "Better get the legs working. Finish up your coffee and go. Don't need your kind here. Just threw out another nut." I didn't look and pushed the cup away, placed 50 cents next to it, and went outside again. I stared at the sky and wished it would do something, envisioning an escalator falling at my feet, or a moment of suspended gravity, anything to relieve the monotony. I went home, taking side streets. All of the houses were alike, their colors, though different in shades, all had the same blandness about them, the same lack of feeling, of character. What an atmosphere, I thought. What an expensive way to discolor a world. So I arrived home no better off, no wiser than before. The environment was so much the same as always, I wondered if it might have somehow become more so than usual. But that was last Wednesday, and here it is Monday again, and I'm as stupidly plodding through life as before. Why I'm unable to react as others, I still have no idea. Why can't I interrelate, commune with them? Where is it we are going? Where is it we come from? Where are we? That's all I want to know, really. It must be that everyone else knows and I don't. How can I be so out of touch? I know what I see. Is that it? My perceptions are all off kilter, but the fields of flowers, if they exist in my mind.
The Early Plastic Shrine by Emily C. Ferrant. This piece was first published by Rampike in 1989. Everything went wrong for the Christmas party. I got a spot on my liver and had to go to the hospital for tests. By the time they were through with me, I was an hour and a half late. Trying to dress was impossible. I couldn't remember how to do it, what went with what. My blue stockings had a tear up the left leg. I put a red top with an orange bottom. Then, as I mounted the stairs to my party, I had an orgasm on each step. This slowed things up considerably. Finally, I arrived, 2 hours late for my own party. The jazz trio from the Indian Reserve was not doing well. No one could hear them. They were performing away from the crowd, toward the air and the trees. Someone in the crowd yelled out, "They stink," and then half the guests left. Meanwhile, I realized that most of the guests were relatives of in-laws I did not like. Who invited them, I wondered. None of my friends were there. Who invited these semi-strangers and all these 11-year-old boys eating up the cakes? My husband said, "We're out of avocados," which meant there could be no more Tex-Mex, and I hadn't even started on the chili, which was to be served in half an hour's time. I decided to leave. On my way out, I witnessed a conversation between a neighbor on her way in and my mother-in-law standing beside her yellow convertible. "I wouldn't bother with the party," my mother-in-law was saying. chances are the toilet bowl hasn't even been cleaned. So I visited my friend, the priest. He'd just come off a long shift with a dead man. I thought that soul would never leave, he said. It just kept flying around the kitchen like a piece of white blubber banging into the kitchen cupboards, scaring the budgie. We made love on a colonial Chesterfield. Outside, snow was falling, one perfect flake at a time. The priest told me, Christmas is a good time to die. I can always tell when a soul is ready to leave a dead man. It begins with the eyes. The furrows between the brows become a canyon, and the eyes pale and stare, almost erotically. While he kissed me, warts grew on my lips. I spent the rest of the night at the early plastic shrine of Leo H. Bakeland in Yonkers, New York. There, beneath a giant replica of a bobbin made in 1912 by combining clean phenolic resin with formaldehyde to create the first truly synthetic plastic, I slept. I dreamed I was a child of the mid-20th century, waiting around for science fiction to come true. I was riding in my personal helicopter. The traffic in the heavens was so congested that fleeing souls were crashing into helicopter blades like demented seagulls. The pillage was awful. Priests by the submarine load had to be called in to place wreaths of plastic bananas at the grave sites. Leo H. Bakeland invited me to dinner. We sat down on the roof of his two-story laboratory to carve a turkey dinner the size of a gelatin capsule. There is nothing new under the sun, he said, handing me my half of the fill. Not true, I wailed. Don't I have Science Digest? Isn't something new promised every month? And right here, beside the ad for fiber optics, doesn't it promise new worlds, new suns? New things are treacherous, said Leo H. Bakeland. Newly invented things, insisting on the future. Possibly we could have done without plastic. Suddenly I was having a nightmare. It was frightening to think of living on without some wonderful anticipation, some happy surprise, some new gadget. I stood at the end of a long black tunnel and shouted to my friend the priest and to Leo H. Bakeland, waiting around for science fiction to come true is a lot more satisfying than waiting around for death. I was crying. Their laughter cut the night like a musical saw. Booze, God, technological fixes, it's all the same to us, they said. The doctor woke me up. Here, he said, removing me from the early plastic shrine. We'll just attach this plastic tubing to your brain and pump you full of someone new to be. It won't take long, and I believe you're an isolated case. I don't believe that what you've got is easily transmitted. You'll be back at your party in no time.
Uh-oh, correction time. At the beginning of this tape, I said it would be the final time I'd use the sound instead of print. Well, that ain't exactly the truth, folks. At the moment, there are 2, maybe 3 more tapes in the works. The aim now is to raise the quality, which means I'll have to stop using these 3 for $1 made in China tape cassettes, eh? Ah, well. So if anyone has any extras, it sure would be appreciated if you sent them to cell number 424, 280 Dundas East, Toronto, Canada, M5A3W1. Now, back to what's next. Billy the Kid by Roger Matthews. I'm Billy the Kid, man, and you'd better not mess with me. The youth drawled before the mirror, his lip curled into a sneer, his arm bent quickly as if in the process of hitting someone across the face, fist clenched, jerky motions. You best stay out of my way, I'm the kid. Behind him on the coffee table top sat a bottle of cheap wine, and beside it 2 small bottles of bitters, society's gift to those who has not the means to stock up on alcohol for the weekend. Bitters might be purchased at the corner store, cheap but high in alcohol content. Billy the Kid walked slowly away from the mirror, looking over his shoulder, checking to see whether or not he looked rough and mean enough to chance going downstairs into the room and house kitchen and open the refrigerator door and take a piece of the bologna sandwich he had seen Terry put there an hour and a half ago. Billy the Kid didn't pray, but if he had, it would only have been that the sandwich might still be there, resting on the rusted tray, and that Terry had gone to the corner bar, as he had said he might. The performance in front of the mirror was to reassure himself that no matter whether the maker of the sandwich was out or not, it would be all right to go down and take it anyway, because everybody was afraid of Billy the Kid, and he might beat them up or shoot them, or, if he didn't have his 6-gun with him, he always carried a knife, and when he stomped his cowboy boots on the wooden stairs leading to the second-floor hall and the kitchen, everybody would know that he was coming and was in a surly mood, and they'd get out of his way, so that would be that. No one messed with the kid, and later, if he was questioned, he could say, "No, man, I never ate your lousy bologna sandwich. You always accuse me of doing things I never do. You better talk to me when you're straight, man. I know you've been drinking. I can smell that there cheap wine you drink, so don't tell me your problems. You probably ate it yourself, and you forgot. I had a drink of water, but I never touched your food, man. Don't lay that on me." Billy the Kid stomped down the stairs and, discovering he was alone in the kitchen, opened the fridge door and took the sandwich. He ripped it in half and stuffed one piece into his mouth, then he put the other piece back. An hour and 2 drinks of the cheap wine later, he returned and ate the other half, figuring if Terry hadn't noticed it by now, he was stupid, or if Terry had noticed it, he had probably been afraid to eat the remaining piece himself, knowing that the kid had dared once more invade his privacy. So for the second time that evening there was the sound of boots clomping down the steps and then back up. The kid was on the telephone. He had placed an advertisement in the personal column of the newspaper saying that he was alone and needed a woman who would understand him. When the phone rang, and he had purposely turned up the volume of the ringing so that others in the house might know, if they cared to, that he was getting responses to the ad, he let it ring 6 times before answering it. "Hello," he finally said. "What do you want?" The voice at the other end mentioned seeing the advertisement and, being intrigued at such a plain, down-to-earth way of expressing oneself, she had decided to call and see for herself if the advertiser was on the level. "I'm always on the level," said Billy. "Come on over and find out for yourself." He gave her the address, and she arrived within the hour. She herself had been feeling a little on the lonesome side, and if the truth be told, the real reason she had dialed his number and not someone else's was because the first 3 digits were the same as hers, and so she knew the advertiser would not live far from where she lived. Billy the Kid, meanwhile, combed down his hair and tidied up his room, dusting off the coffee table top and wiping away the rings of wet wine from the glass he had been using that had tipped over earlier, sometime between eating the 2 pieces of the sandwich belonging to Terry, who had left it, the kid assumed, for him, perhaps as some kind of a peace offering. There had been a little trouble in the hallway leading to the kitchen the night before, the kid suddenly remembered. He rolled his eyes up and away from the mirror and stared into the air for a moment, his brows knitted in deep thought. "Oh, yeah," he said quietly, as if there was someone standing right next to him. "That dumb broad's husband come up to the 2nd floor and started mouthing off to my friend Terry, and I had to go down and straighten everything out. Terry got mad and told me to mind my own business. He never understands, man, never. All I was trying to do is keep him from getting hurt. He's my buddy." The girl's name was Dolores, and she looked as if she had just stepped out of a time machine which had picked her up at an Elvis Presley concert early, maybe 1957. She chewed gum and her hair was stringy, and she wore too much makeup, a tight skirt, and a red sweater that looked as if it had been poured onto her body. Billy the Kid's eyes lit up slightly, and they didn't do that very often. Usually they were dull and smoldering with some strange hatred even the kid at times didn't understand. He was lounging on the sofa, his feet on the coffee table top, when she knocked at the door. He had purposely shut it, but not tight, just tight enough to give him warning if someone was about to enter, for with the door not closed tightly he could hear the squeaking on the stairs. A mouse would not have been able to get up those steps without his noticing. He had trained his ears for attacks in the night. He kept a bread knife beneath his pillow for such, although none had ever occurred, but he told himself it could be one of those nights. The air in the room was smoky and stale and reeked of the cheap wine. He had not bothered to put the bottles of bitters away, but when he saw Dolores standing in the doorway, he moved one foot so that his big boots might cover them. He didn't want her to see them, not yet. "You're my girl," he said. "Come on over here and sit down," he said. "You're my girl tonight. I got a lot of girls, but you're her tonight. Maybe forever. I don't know. Could be. Come on and sit." He motioned to her as a child might motion to a dog, imitating the way an adult might do such a thing. She smiled, removed her coat, and walked across the room to the sofa. "Well, how do you like my collection?" he asked, pointing to the window ledge where he kept an assortment of empty wine bottles, all different, all cheap, one half full of urine. He took this opportunity, when her gaze went away from him, to snatch up the 2 bottles of bitters and stuff them under the cushion of the sofa he was sitting on. Not waiting for her to comment, having achieved his purpose, Billy the Kid abruptly jumped up and grabbed her by the arm, pulled her down to the sofa. "Well, I ain't gonna hurt you," he said, "but you gotta understand one thing. Tonight you're my girl. There may be some other people coming over here, and I want you to be my girl. Don't pay attention to nobody else, and if you're smart, you will be my girl." Dolores smiled and asked, between chews of the gum, whether or not she might indulge in a bit of wine. "I only got 1 glass," the kid said, "but I'll share it with you. I like the way you look. You're polite. You got good taste. You gotta have good taste to be with Billy the Kid." "I thought you said your name was Sandy on the phone," Dolores said, not really caring much what his name was. She had reached out her hand to take a drink from the kid's glass when he grabbed her arm. "You can't talk to me like that. I got a lot of names. My friends call me Billy. Sometimes I use Sandy on the phone. You never know who might be listening. The CIA's after me, and so are the bikers. That's why I keep my door locked. That's why I made you knock. You never know who might be coming up those steps. But I can tell by the sound of the feet, you see. Your feet are real light. I like that, Dolores." Dolores had already been drinking, and Billy's remarks went over her head. She wasn't listening, but wondering how long it would be before the lights went out and they would be in bed together, although Billy the Kid didn't have a bed, she noted, only a sofa, but it didn't much matter as long as she could sleep afterwards. "You're not listening to me, Dolores. If you're going to be my girl, you got to listen. You got to be on my side, not against me like everybody else. That Terry downstairs, he's a bad dude, and when he comes home tonight, he might be up here like it was last night, threatening and pounding and banging around like it was his place, not mine. I don't even know why I let him in." Dolores's arm had been let go of, and the kid let her drink from the glass of wine. He let her refill it when it was empty. She had a hand on his leg and had leaned her head onto his shoulder, but Billy the Kid wasn't sure if he really liked that, not this early. He wanted Terry to see Dolores, and he had called June earlier, and she had said all right, she would come over, but just the once could he be civil and not so uncaring. She might stay the night, she said, if he would treat her like a human being and not like some object to pleasure himself with, and he had said he would. He apologized and told her he was getting some good wine, not the cheap stuff, but really good stuff, and asked if she had $10 to loan him until tomorrow. She said she'd be over about 11 o'clock, and she'd bring the $10 and hoped he would save some wine for her. At 15 minutes to 11, the kid heard the downstairs front door open and close, and he could tell it was not Terry or that idiot Jake who never seemed to acknowledge his existence. He knew it was June because of the way the door closed, real quiet-like. "Shut the door, Dolores," he said, and she got up and shut it. "Lock it," he said, and she locked it. A moment later there was a rapping at the door, and Billy the Kid told Dolores to get up and answer it. She had just made herself comfortable, but she realized that whoever it was would not go away, especially when she heard a female voice ask, "Sandy, open the door. I know you're in there." And so Dolores got up again and opened the door. The story in the newspaper said that the dead man's body was found in the hall by a neighbor who had come to loan money to someone at the house, and that the body of a Dolores Hartford was found in the room of the dead man. The newspapers, however, did not get their facts straight. The truth was that Terry McLean had been home all night nursing a slow-burning urge to do violence to one Alexander Rutledge. The truth also was not known about the removal of a female body from the 3rd floor to a 2nd floor room. The reporters and the police had not realized that Terry McLean was slightly jealous of Alexander Rutledge. Neither did they know that June Bartlett, the neighbor who had arrived in an inconvenient moment, the exact time of the murder-suicide, in fact, was deeply in love with Billy the Kid, and so had aided in the cleaning up of the result of the mutual frustration and anger of she and the kid. It was, after all, only a murder in a rooming house, one that had a poor reputation at that, and since there was no one left to urge that charges be brought against anyone, it was left at that. The police, finding 2 empty bottles of bitters in the room of Terry McLean, believed the story given by the 2 remaining survivors, Sandy and June. Sandy showed them the $10 bill. He even took them into the kitchen and showed them the empty refrigerator. "Oh, what am I supposed to do, man?" he said. "Starve? The old lady brought me over some bread, that's all, so I could eat." Oh, that Billy the Kid was a wild one, all right. Dispatch by Dwight E. Humphreys. The entire world is enveloped in combat. You say, what war? The war of poverty. Not the war on poverty, but the relentless grinding of poverty and all that it brings. This is a dispatch from behind the lines. I'm not qualified as a foreign correspondent, so I'll limit myself to the American theater of operations. At one time, I was in the front lines. I'm still uncomfortably close to the line, but my circumstances are better now. America is the richest country in the world. There is ample fact for that. Yet there are people in this country with no homes and little to eat. Poverty in America is more common than one would think. The ghettos. Appalachia, the rural countryside elsewhere, these are the combat zones and are not far removed from the average citizen's life. You think it can't happen to you, but most of the homeless were once contributing members of society. What happened? They fell through the net of social responsibility. It can happen and does. The thing is, the poverty line is rising. What were once comfortable means is now a mere sop thrown to the wolves that are indeed abroad. The poor have always been with us, but this number is increasing. The lower classes, students and farmers are now struggling more and more against a rising tide of want. But not everyone feels the pinch. There are more than a few fat cats who have wealth and privilege and are willing to defend it with a tenacity as grim as any jungle firefight. The American melting pot is not working. Like the alchemist's furnaces and retorts, the base material melts and there is little gold. Americans pride themselves on having a democratic society, but the current regime is no more democratic than the dictatorships of the past. Not while there is poverty, hunger, poor health care. The middle class watches the economy with trepidation. It is widely seen that what was once adequate finances is now being consumed at an alarming rate by a machine upon which the rich ride with little heed. The well-off are uncomfortable about the increasing number of poor. Gosh, Mabel, let's pray they go away. Gee, it's just not fun anymore to keep up with the Joneses. The poor will not go away. There will be increasing tension. The parallels of Germany between the wars and the U.S. of today are growing increasingly closer. I predict in the future there will be war between the haves and the have-nots. It will be bloody, and this country will be torn apart while politicians grapple to fill the vacuum at the top. Combat is already taking place in the low-rent districts. Witness all the weekend drunken violence. Having no other way of releasing hostility and misery, the poor take it out on each other. The anger is there. It is truly frightening that someone may rise with the clarity of vision and demonic energy to harness all the fury beneath the surface. It can happen here. The race riots of the 50s and 60s, and even earlier, were the first skirmishes of the war. The largely white middle class were horrified when the journalists, largely white and middle class, reported there were pissed-off niggers with guns and Molotov cocktails burning the inner city. The anger had not ebbed. The anger has not ebbed and continues just as strong. The establishment of this country has bated breath, and it is not likely Watson Detroit will happen again as isolated occurrences. For the poor, it is logical to hate the immediate surroundings, the walls that close in on one, the grime, the poor food. Thus the poor destroy their environments whose flora and fauna is grass struggling in vacant lots, mangy curs, tattered cats, and wharf rats the size of some chihuahuas. The average ghetto dweller cannot conceive of wide lawns and tree-shaded walks. The suburbs are another country entirely. The riots, despite what the silent majority thinks, were not the acts of provocateurs, but a spontaneous outpouring of dissatisfaction. Had they been truly organized, the suburbs would have burnt as well. There may come a time when the paroxysms are directed. It can happen here. You say the police and military can handle it. Shoot them like the dogs they are. But wait, the average soldier and police officer will probably be as strapped for funds as the opponents facing the riot batons. In the armed forces, sympathy is not for the officers and privileged, but rather for the folks back home. The average soldier is not going to fire his weapon at his neighbor. There will probably be mutinies and desertions. Up to this point, the armed forces have been fairly controlled and neutral, but control will probably break down under the tensions of civil war. At one time I lived below the poverty line and am still fairly close to it. I know firsthand the gnawing pain of poor nutrition, the lack of choices, the lack of many things, and am still angry. I am no biblical prophet, however. They believe their society could improve. I do not. I can no longer afford to believe in the American dream and am instead plugged into the American reality, the preying upon others, the base for this society. Enjoy it while you can. It is not permanent and immutable, but can crumble like any other work of man.
Stono, the pianist, had with him from his group bassist Billy Bauer, and like I say, it was Charlie Parker in there. Dizzy made it too, yes, and Miles Davis was coming up, Fats Navarro. Those are the bebop days, eh? Those are, I guess.
Two poems by M. Gent. Legacy. He was almost 58 when he died. Some were shocked, but not many. Just enough to make him seem human. His body was a cell where he sat with the poisons. His mind was a cell where he swam and composed lyrics for his son. Some called him lost or shrank from him when they caught the dry tinge on his breath. But everyone who fell into him came up with their eyes open. He made sure his son would be comfortable, finding it easier to give anonymously and without blame. He left him various riches, property, liquid assets, family treasures, etc., and a small silver chip, roughly the size of a dollar coin, with two letters on one side, A. A. If a father is meant to teach his son about life, then here endeth the lesson. Personality. Your room is a vast arena where cultures clash and compete for my attention. As you talk on the phone, I wander around, head cocked at some ridiculous angle to read book titles, or neck straining to study a picture hung high on the wall. Beads, earrings, ornaments, film, scotch tape, magazines, doodles, plants, paintbrushes, perfumes, psychedelic speakers, etc., etc. If a person's room is a reflection of their personality, then I'm in trouble. My lease runs out next month. Well, somebody said they wanted to hear a little music. Okay, well, this is a song written and sung by Robert Bertrand.
The bullfrog bells from his lily pad, the cricket chirps from his blade of grass, the tomcat calls in the pale moonlight, where the lone wolf wails on the edge of night. The rat and the sword, he's a noble beast. He does what he can, to say the least. Kill a man when he's down and you give him a gun. Whoa, he do what he can to get the job done. Well, I put you in an orphanage when you're two. When you get a little older, they put put you in a zoo. Put you out on the street when you're 17. Educated to be crooked, deceitful and mean. Kick a man when he's down, then you give him a gun. Well, you do what you can to get the job done. When I fall from the tavern into the street, drinking hard and steady for about a week. Yes, I'm drinking again, nobody's to blame. I'm trying hard to kill some unnamed pain. Give a man when he's down, then you give him a gun. Well, you do what you can to get the job done. If you deny a man to keep him hold a wife, he'll satisfy his hunger with the aid of a knife. If you show him how you live in the Disney dream, he shows you a house of horrors where he just lives. Give a man when he's down, then you give him a gun. He'll pick you out from a rooftop one by one. I've been drinking now for a week or more. The bars are all closed, so's the liquor store. I pick myself right up from the cold hard ground. I notice there ain't no cops around. Jack Daniel's so lonesome for some company. There's just a plate glass window between him and me. Kick a man when he's down and you give him a gun. He pick you up from the rooftops one by one. Kick a man when he's down, then you give him a gun. He'll pick you up from the rooftops one by one.
Well, now, for all you movers and shakers on Parliament Hill, We have a story by Apolitical. I'm not sure if his first name is Arnold or Adolf. It's called A Short Journey to Hull and Back. In Hull, Quebec, across the river from that great political center of Ottawa in Canada, situated on a small side street, there is a certain nightclub which no one will admit exists. Even the proprietor has been known to deny any knowledge of it, also its patrons. It stands, a row of houses forever in need of paint on one side and an all-night self-serve gas station on the other. There is not a thing on the outside of the building to draw a passerby's attention, and one must enter via a rear door simply marked in red, Exit. It would be rude to mention anything about the manner in which a liquor license was granted to an establishment with only one door, for this might conjure up thoughts of bribery, a thing unheard of in Hull, or in Ottawa for that matter. But in fact there is no other way out except by the passageway through which you enter. There is not even a window. Once inside, you will discover, scattered around a pool table, 20 or so tables, most of which are taken by unsavory-looking characters, male and female alike, none of which you are likely to ever have seen before. Having said this, please allow me to begin introductions. Closest to the pool table, fidgeting with burning cigarettes and stolen lighters, you'll notice several leather-jacketed men with long, unkempt hair, and with them their ladies. Now and again, one of the ladies will rise from the table and disappear out through the door, and while she is gone, her man will sit quietly sipping on a bottle of beer, listening to the conversation of the others, laughing at the appropriate times, but constantly watching the door for his lady's return. Not far from this group, at the tables along the wall, sit a variety of others, mostly men. Two of these are from the suburbs, looking forward to an evening of pleasure, and with enough drink to get their courage up, one will approach a leather jacket, perhaps in the washroom, and inquire discreetly as to exactly how such pleasure may be obtained, where it may be had, and how much it will cost. Seated next to these gentlemen are three regular customers. They frequented the establishment for months, are very rough-looking, and have never been seen without at least one day's growth of beard on their faces. They speak broken English with a Greek accent, though one of them lapses into his native French if he's had more than 2 drinks, while another, although he will not admit it, cannot get rid of a Scottish brrr when certain words are spoken. The third has overcome speech difficulties and is only given away by his constantly moving eyes, searching the faces of newcomers. All three, of course, are undercover detectives, and their disguises fool only themselves and the 2 men from the suburbs. The remaining tables are occupied by an assortment of old men and the occasional old woman who live in the neighborhood and presumably have no better place to spend their monthly government checks. So the stage has been set for a most extraordinary appearance of a mysterious visitor. Order up yourself a drink, listener. Sit at that table in the corner there, and you shall see for yourself who it is. The door flies open, and the stranger enters carrying a small brown briefcase and wearing a very fashionable suit that only seems to fit around the waist and nowhere else. But that is all the rage in Paris, as everyone knows, and no one even suppresses a grin upon seeing such otherwise ridiculously baggy and out-of-proportion attire. The only response to the newcomer's entrance, if you look closely at the faces of certain individuals near the pool table, is that rather than pupils you might see dollar bills forming in their eyes. But this is all to be expected given such a club and clientele. The stranger moves across the door to the bar, his feet barely touching the carpeted cement. He orders the bartender to buy a round for the house, whatever anyone is drinking, and notes with a sly smile that no one, except the 2 men from the suburbs, orders what they were previously drinking, but naturally something far more expensive. This done, he orders a cup of black coffee for himself with an extra empty cup for who knows what purposes, and proceeds to sit at a table near the doorway. The momentary buzz of talk about who this person is and why he has bought everyone drinks subsides as he looks up and around the room. His eyes are darker than lumps of coal and seem to burn with a strange red fire in the center of them. No one is able to withstand his gaze, and all heads bow for an instant, even yours, listener. But the instant you look down at your table, the strange eyes are forgotten, and only the memory of someone having bought the house a free round remains in your head, in your mind, stuck there like a lump in the throat you cannot get rid of. No one watches as the man with the burning eyes pours a portion of his coffee into the empty cup. No one sees him reach down and open his brown bag and take out a certain vial, then put a drop of its contents into one of the cups. Everyone has gone back to whatever mischief they have been up to before he entered. In fact, they do not recognize or realize what has taken place at all. Even the bartender is befuddled and cannot remember who bought the drinks. It may have been John, he says to himself, but no, John's shipment hadn't come in yet, had it? And there hadn't been time to move it, surely. Henri? Ah, the stranger by the door. The bartender suddenly remembers. That's who it was. I wonder who he is. He looks so familiar, but not in those atrocious clothes. Then, as if his very thought had been heard by the stranger, an odd thing happens. The tip the stranger had left on the ledge of the bar, a $10 bill, began to slowly move toward the cash register. The bartender's eyes follow it in disbelief as it climbs to the keyboard and hops onto no sale, punches it, then leaps into the $10 bill slot. The bartender's eyes went wide and his face turned white as two $5 bills crawled up out of the till and slid over onto the bar itself, one ripping itself into shreds while the other gaily dove off the edge and floated across to the stranger's table, where it scuttled beneath an ashtray and finally lay still. Shaking his head in astonishment, the bartender picked up the shredded $5 bill and stared blankly at it, said a silent Hail Mary, and stuffed it into his pocket, thinking later to tape it all together, and slammed the cash register door shut. It was at this point that a scream came from across the room, and a table was almost knocked over by the excitement caused by the finding of a small purple worm in the bottom of a glass of vermouth ordered by Sarah, one of the girls. No one at all noticed a cup raised into the air by itself and being drained of its contents and set softly back onto a table near the door. "Ah," said the stranger to no one noticeable, "I believe it's time to play a little pool." And having said so, he stood up and proceeded toward the table, where at once the fellow stacking the balls elbowed him away, saying, "Your name's not on the board, friend." "But yes, it is," said the man with the designer clothes. "You've only got to look and see for yourself that it is." And sure enough, a new and frightening name was neatly printed on the blackboard. Surely the listener saw it too. "There's no need to mention it here." "Are you certain? Very well. But it must be stated that not everyone read the same words. Didn't you see how horrified Jeanette Marie looked when she glanced at the board, or the ugly glare of Jacques? Well, you and I are fortunate to have perhaps cleaner consciences than some." The stranger disregarded the gasps and oohs and ahs of the patrons and proceeded to remove what appeared to be a pen from his vest pocket. He twisted it, and it grew longer and thicker until, lo and behold, there was an official-sized cue stick in his hands. It's no wonder nobody wanted to play against him. Obviously, he was a master. Not even the fellow who had not wanted to give up the table would play. "Sacrement," he said, "the man is a devil," and backed away from the table, spilling 2 glasses of beer in the process, his rear end bumping into a man who was standing, his eyes bugged out, trying to balance what he saw with his own reality, the 2 glasses of beer already tipped and leaking yellow onto the floor and down his pants into his boots. The coffee cup floated over to the master and clinked against the cue stick. "Ah, cereal! Another drop! Very well, but you must play for it." With that, the cup gently laid itself on a table in front of one of the girls, who shrieked. Then a pool cue, held by a previous player, slipped out of his fingers as if someone had tugged on it, and a voice, squeaky and a bit shrill, like a record being played at a too fast speed, was heard to ask, "Shall I break, or would you like to?" Whereupon the master replied, "Not only may you break, but I'll spot you 3 balls." What happened next you know well, dear listener. The cue stick struck the white ball violently, causing 3 low balls to fly into the air, one landing smack into an astonished suburbanite's beer glass, another smashing against a lamp, shattering the bulb, and the third soaring ungraciously across the room to the bar, where it landed in the middle of the forehead of the bartender, knocking him out. "Well," said the squeaky voice, "there goes the 3 balls. Is it still my turn?" "Go ahead," said the master. The cue stick swung up into the air and came down upon the white ball with such force that everyone in the room lowered their heads, not wanting to share the bartender's fate. "My Christ," said one of the girls, "I think I'll go outside for a while." She got up and half ran toward the exit, stopped in her tracks, and stood as still as a statue. "Very good, Cereal," said the master. "But didn't you tell them the door is locked in any case, and that no one is permitted to leave?" At this, 3 or 4 of the leather-jacketed young men attempted to get up from their chairs, either to attack the master or to run for the door and check whether or not he was telling the truth. They found, however, they could not budge from their places, as if they had been crazy glued down. "Ah," said Cereal, "a captive audience. Place your bets, ladies. Over here, gentlemen. Put your money on the table here. Move those ashtrays, you dummy. What? You refuse? You are a dummy." And the man instantly turned into a department store mannequin, shaved head and all, and quite naked. "Now," shouted Cereal, the voice without a body, quite enjoying this, "place your bets in front of the dummy." Everyone, as you know, turned their pockets inside out and threw whatever was in them onto the table. Money clips, coins, marijuana seeds, trinkets, stolen lighters, cigarettes, $20 bills, rings, watches, you name it. "So there's my necklace, you bastard," shouted one of the men to one of the others. "And my watch," yelled another. "My comb." This yelling would have gone on all night, since no one could get up to attack the other, but the sudden rapping of a cue stick on the tabletop settled everyone down. "Now place your bets," said the squeaky voice. "Who'll bet on whom? You over by the wall, you 3 policemen. Is gambling illegal here? Isn't it? Arrest these people. Police, do your duty." The three policemen, however, could not move either. Serial had obviously forgotten this. Well, he was never incredibly intelligent. The master couldn't vouch for that. "Just what's going on here?" asked one of the detectives, shouting to make himself heard. "Who's in charge? Why can't anyone move?" "They've slipped drugs into our beer," said one of his friends, pouring the rest of his glass onto the floor. "They're trying to make us think we're crazy." "Then we're discovered," yelled the third. "Quiet," commanded Serial. "The master's in deep concentration. Don't speak until he shoots." It was true. The master was studying the layout of the pool table, his head bent low over it, the pen turned cue stick between his fingers, moving back and forth, back and forth. Click! Bang, 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 bang. All 12 remaining balls bounced over the sides of the table onto the floor, bouncing higher and higher, moving out across the room onto the tables, one for each table. Some of the balls taking up 2 tables, bouncing back and forth from one to the other, bouncing, bouncing. There seemed no end to their ability to do this. One would think gravity would have had something to do about slowing them down, but no, gravity too was suspended in this place where all other laws were normally suspended anyway. It seemed fitting, but wait, what was happening now? The master's clothes were changing. His entire form was altering. A cloud of mist swirled around him, and his whole appearance took on that of a more familiar one. "Pierre!" shouted the crowd. "It's Pierre!" Yes, the tall stature, the burning eyes, the way he carried himself. Who said he was no longer in power? And Ottawa, just across the bridge. They said he'd return. They said he would. He himself had said, "Don't tempt me, I might be back." And here he was, settling up in his own way. "Shall I stop the balls, boss?" asked Serial. "No, no, I do not think that is necessary," said the master. For although he was now seen as someone known as Pierre, he was still the master. "But let them go on bouncing a while," he said. "Let them remind these people that they are still subjects, that they must still serve someone. Let them watch the pretty balls. Ah, but maybe one color is not enough." The balls began switching places, jumping from table to table as if the tables themselves were in the hands of a juggler gone mad. Everyone was getting dizzy, but couldn't take their eyes from the balls. One of the men fainted, and a girl began to laugh. The ball that had been in front of the fellow who'd fainted immediately bounced over to the girl and struck her squarely on top of the head, just hard enough to make her stop laughing, whereupon Serial started roaring with laughter, doubling up, his hands holding his sides, though of course no one could see him. It was just as well, for Serial, in reality, was a large brown rat, about the size of a French poodle. His eyes were green, his teeth a sickly yellow, and his coat had about as much gloss to it as the tops of the Parliament buildings across the river. As a matter of fact, he lived in that river, and several unnameable things or parts thereof happened to be stuck in the hairier portions of his body. Yes, it was lucky no one could see him, for they might have laughed at his blue jacket and turquoise hat, and especially at the fact he wore no pants, and had on 2 different colored sneakers, neither of which fit. At this point, dear listener, do you remember the ball that nearly landed in your drambuie? Your mind faded from your body, and you passed out at that point. You don't even remember getting home, back to the capital, do you? Well, it doesn't matter. Needless to say, your vote in the House next afternoon saved the day. Capital punishment indeed. Who do these jokers think they're acting on behalf of? The devil? God? The master? Pierre? But it doesn't matter. Now that they've turned against yet another of their promises, they'll soon be out looking for more respectable jobs. What an uproar you caused when you changed your mind in mid-speech. How they jeered when you told them, oh, so casually, that you were leaving politics forever and were going to devote the rest of your lifetime to carrying on the work of Pierre, who, incidentally, wasn't there that night. It was only an illusion, you see. After all, wasn't it the master's establishment, and wasn't he able to do as he wished? It wasn't as if he had never been there before. And to think no one will ever remember. That's right, after the night was finished, after Serial put everyone to sleep with a drop of his master's vial of serum, they all woke up in the morning reformed. Yes, yes, you may spell that any way you wish, or take any meaning you like, but whatever way you take it, they all woke up in the morning like newborn babes. Jacques married Brenda, and Henri stopped dealing drugs. Even John and Marie ran away together. Imagine! The 3 policemen turned in their badges, too. One of them drives a cab now. The other 2 have gone into partnership, a hot dog stand in Market Square. Can you beat that? And the others, why, they're all good citizens. Even the old men and women have changed. They no longer sit and drink every day, complaining about how rough life is under such and such a type of government. No, no, they're out there campaigning every day, even on Saturdays, telling people to give the government a chance. They're only doing what they have light to see by to do, after all. It's not as if they're out to get anyone. Don't complain, citizens. Things are worse on the other side of the river. Look at what's happening to the reporters in the press gallery, for instance. They've all gone out to work for underground newspapers. The ladder of success is collapsing. All the rungs are rotting out right from beneath their feet. Well, who was the master? Who is the master? You mean? My, I'm not going to tell you if you're in such a state that you think he, Or was it a she? Only exists in your imagination or on the dark patches of the white of a page. Oh, listener, and here I thought you were following me all along, while you too are just a fabrication of the master's thought, a pawn in a game you think you invented. Wait, no, don't go away. I'm not being harsh with you. Let me tell you the truth. The building doesn't exist. There is no such bar, no such people, and no master. No floating cups or cue sticks, no bouncing balls. All of it's a lie, everything. We're all imagining things. That's why no one will ever admit it exists. It doesn't. Does this make you happy? Are you satisfied with that explanation? After all, this is only a story, a little piece of fiction. It's nothing really, a speck in the horizon, a cloud that will disappear after a time, rather like cereal. It's all a fantasy, dear listener, like you, yes, like Pierre, like the Houses of Parliament with their rotting ceilings, their jet planes to nowhere, and ideas of grandeur. Everybody knows who rules the world, yet people are satisfied with thinking they rule a city, a country. I give up. What left is there for me to say? Nothing. I repeat, there is nothing left. And due to that remarkable circumstance, I shall not attempt to say it.
I left my old Cape Breton home to hit the big times. I hit the hard times more than once along the way. Yes, I was gonna make them great. It seemed like yesterday I kissed my folks goodbye. And now I hang my head and cry. Well, as Island boy, you're singing the blues. Well, as Island boy, you're singing the blues. Well, now we ain't got nothing left they can lose. Yes, I had it, God, you see, ain't nothing you can take from me. There's nothing left to give. There's hardly a reason left to live. Oh no. And as Island boy, he's singing the blues. Yeah, I've been playing on the rough side of town. Yes, and it really has begun to get me down. Well, now it used to be a joke, but now it's become some kind of yoke. I just can't seem to shake it free. Yeah, I live my life in misery. 'Cause Island boy, he's singing the blues. Well, that is Island boy, he's singing the blues. You know this island boy, he's singing the blues.
Yeah, a little more Robert Burton to round off this issue.
Pretty soon, I'll be ready for the road. Grab my guitar and my case, and I'll hit that golden road. Now you can put me down, yes, a good man he will rise. I've been leaving this old town for blue, a better sky. Well, my papa, he told me, son, you better stay in school. Become someone important, boy, and lay down that devil's tool. But a guitar, it lured me just like a lady of the night. I was way too deep in love to put up a decent fight. Well, for 15 years I played them in the taverns and the bars. I've been wired, fired, hired, I've been told it would go far. Had 1,000 people tell me I was way above the rest. And the guitar king Lord is coming, and he will do his best.